Right.
I love what I do, but how do I figure out how to make money doing what I do? Especially when you don't come from money. My credit was shot. I didn't have business credit. I didn't know anything about that. I couldn't get a loan from the bank, so it's like, how do you market yourself to really be competitive? Like, how do you get yourself off the ground? So when I started my company, I didn't know anything about business at the time. I mean, I had a little bit of experience, but like you said, I thought that, okay, we're going to build a business from a bootstrap and work our way up because of all the stories and things that you hear in the media. Well, that's just the way it is. So you're just supposed to struggle from the ground up. I didn't know that you can actually start a business highly profitable if you do it the right way. I didn't know that yet, but so I did it all the wrong way. I chased customers. I barely made ends meet. I worked really, really hard. So all I did was quit a job to create a job for myself that didn't make any money, but it gave me some perks here and there, right? That wasn't it for me. I'm like, this can't be it either, right? I'm like,
right.
I love what I do, but how do I figure out how to make money doing what I do? Especially when you don't come from money. My credit was shot. I didn't have business credit. I didn't know anything about that. I couldn't get a loan from the bank, so it's like, how do you market yourself to really be competitive? Like, how do you get yourself off the ground? Well, there wasn't a way to do that, like working backwards. And so that's when I started asking questions and I started freelancing for higher end entrepreneurs, like high level entrepreneurs who were like already millionaires, billionaires, right? And I just start asking them, like, what are you doing? How did you do it? Did you start like this? One particular entrepreneur, he was a multi-billionaire, and I had known him from the community. And I'm like, how did you go from hood to millions and billions of dollars? How did you do that? And so he said, well, I sell to the government. And he said, it took a really good serious look at me because I was freelancing and building his portfolio with videos and photography and building his website. He's like, the same thing you're doing for me, you can do for the government and land lucrative contracts. He's like, in fact, they would love you because you're an African-American and you're a woman. Like, they would love you. So I said, you can sell to the government? Like, you're thinking war weapons, you're thinking go to war and army suits and like all that stuff. Like, you could do that. That's when everything began to click. That was the very first time that I had heard that a regular person can sell to the government. And so from there, everything changed.
That's when you really began to focus in on what that meant. Going back just a second, though, how did being a mother impact your decision to become an entrepreneur?
Number one, time. I think for me, I wanted to buy back my time. I didn't know how to do that, but I knew that entrepreneurship was going to be the way for me to be able to spend the time that I needed with my baby without having to leave her for extended hours of the day while I'll go work for someone else. So being a mom gave me the strength and the desire to want to go figure it out. And some kids grow up and like, well, you were never there, especially for when people work really hard for other people. They're like, you were never really there. If you hear that and you work really hard for somebody else, you're like, well, I guess I was busy providing for you, right?
Exactly.
Well, I was there. You have clothes. I sent you to college. I took care of you and all those things. But it's the moments that you miss. You're not able to attend field trips and not able to be there, be on the parent advisory board. And like those intimate moments make a huge difference when you're going to the games and you're showing up. It does make a huge difference than just being a provider. And so for me, that's how being a mom impacted my decision to go ahead and figure out entrepreneurship, because nobody just jumps into it knowing it all unless you had a coach. Nobody jumps into it knowing it all. It's definitely a field where you learn as you go, but you have to be willing to keep going even when you bump your head.
Oh, and you will bump your head many times.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that for sure. So I looked up the most recent figures from the Small Business Administration. I know there are trillions of dollars, but there was $154.2 billion was awarded to small businesses in 2022, which was more than they had earmarked. That's a lot of money just in and of itself that they have to spend. You talked about your epiphany. You were speaking with this guy. He was like, this is how I do it. What did you do next? Did you start to research it?
Yeah, so I started researching it. And what I found was like I started looking up the numbers and the statistics and trying to figure out how it worked. It took me like I would say a little over a year to really make sense of contracting with the government. I didn't know. I didn't know like how it really worked. Nobody knows how it works, especially if you're trying to do it on your own. It's just, I started finding out like about PTAC, which is the Federal Procurement Technical Assistance Center, where they're paid to like kind of help you through the process. But even that, it's a free program. Even that, their employees, they don't know really about government contracts. All they can do is tell you is do this paperwork and do this. And they just like
Right.
throw a bunch of darts, right? So I went through that resource. I went through the SBA resource. I went through SCORE resource, and I still couldn't figure it out. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go do it. And I did it backwards. Like, I was like, I don't care if I do it wrong. I'm going to do it wrong until I get it right. And that's really how I learned it. I was doing it wrong. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, here, throw this over here and just throw it. I didn't have time to go try to piece together a little bit of information from over here and a little bit of information from over there, and then try to learn from employees behind the desk who's not in the field doing it. I started asking people in the field who were doing it, what did you do? How did you get there? And then I just started trying to do it myself. And then I looked at all the wrong pieces that were coming back, and I'm like, okay, well, let me tweak this and do that. It didn't begin to make sense to me because I was actually doing it and doing it wrong. I think John Maxwell says it the best. He talks about failing forward. When you fail forward, you don't just fail and say it didn't work. Well, you fail and you learn from your mistakes, and you get up and you continue to do it again and make tweaks until you get there. And so that's how I learned. I learned it by making all the mistakes. So now I'm an expert at making all the mistakes, and I know how to do it correctly. This is how now I'm able to coach people and say, don't do it that way because here's why. Because I did it wrong. When I finally got it right, I looked at all the things that I did that first time. I said, looks like I got something here, right? And then I did it again, and I landed my first contract. It was $70,000 for 28 days of work on a multi-trillion-dollar project, and it was simply because I just happened to be a woman and a minority. That's how I got a piece of that pie.
What were you doing? Was it video work?
So it was video production and it was photography work. So they were like, well, can you take pictures? Yeah, same thing. It's the same world. Video is nothing more than a bunch of pictures put together in multiple frames, right? So like, yeah, I could take pictures. So I didn't know anything about ISO. I didn't know anything about aperture and all this expert about lenses and none of that. I just knew that I could just point and click. So I did that. And so that's exactly what I did. It was one of the most amazing experiences being on a multi-trillion-dollar project. So now I can say I have that under my belt. Well, I didn't win a multiple trillion-dollar contract, but I performed on a multi-trillion-dollar project and I got a piece of that pie. And getting a piece of the pie, like $70,000 to me for 28 days when I was working 60 hours, 70 hours a week to make 80 or 90, that was a game changer for me. And so I did it again, and I landed another contract simultaneously. It was like $60,000. I did it again. I landed another contract. It was like another $70,000. Before I knew it, I was simultaneously making multiple six figures for minimum work, minimum part-time work. Like I was like on a project maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, and I was making that type of money, and it was like complete game changer.